Feminine energy, soft girl era, divine feminine, these phrases are everywhere right now. And yet, if you were to ask 10 different people about what they actually mean, you would probably get about 10 different answers. And that's because the conversation around femininity has become a blend of dating advice, aesthetics, older gender stereotypes, and spiritual language, all mixed together depending on context. As a result, the meaning often shifts depending on who's using the term rather than there being any shared definition. And that's why so many people are left with the same quiet question underneath. What does healthy feminine energy actually look like when you move past the buzzwords? So today we're going to step outside of that noise entirely. Instead of another opinion, another trend, or another self-help framework, we're going to look at one of the oldest astrological traditions to explore a surprisingly simple question. What is feminine energy when it is expressed in its healthiest, most whole, most alive form? Hi fellow seekers, this is Nadia, and in this video we're going to explore feminine polarity through the lens of Vedic astrology and the archetypal symbolism found in ancient astrological tradition. Here's how we'll approach it. First, we'll clarify what we actually mean by feminine energy in this context. Then we'll look at the two core astrological indicators of feminine polarity, the moon and Venus, and why these two are traditionally associated with the feminine principle in ancient texts. From there, we'll explore how this polarity shows up through four key signs: Taurus, Cancer, Libra, and Pisces, each expressing a different facet of feminine energy. And finally, I'll bring it all together into a clear summary of feminine traits with timestamps so you can jump around if you want to revisit specific parts. For each trait, I'll break down what it looks like when it's expressed in a healthy, grounded way versus when it becomes blocked or distorted. That said, if you want everything to really click, I'd recommend watching it through from the beginning because each layer builds on the last. This is also the second video in my series on masculine and feminine polarities, and if you haven't seen the first one on masculine energy, you can watch that after this video. Now let's begin. Let's start with what we actually mean here, because feminine energy is one of those phrases that gets used a lot and not always carefully. We're not talking about women specifically, though yes, it's more common for women to carry more feminine than masculine polarity in their expression. What we're really pointing to is an energetic principle, something that lives within each of us and within the fabric of the universe itself. Think of it as one half of an inner polarity, and I want to emphasize that word polarity because polarities only exist in relation to each other. You can't have a North Pole without a South Pole. You can't have the yin without the yang. These aren't competing forces, but rather two halves of one moving whole. The yin-yang symbol captures this beautifully. Yin is the dark, receptive, inward principle. Yang is the bright, active, outward one. And notice that the symbol doesn't draw them as opposites facing off of each other. It shows them curling into each other, each one containing a seed of the other in perpetual motion. And that's the point. Life isn't about choosing one over the other. It's about learning when each is needed and allowing both to express themselves in a healthy way. Life is about complexity, contrast, and constant change and movement. The happiest and most psychologically integrated people aren't those who identify with only one polarity. They're the ones who feel comfortable and confident expressing both the masculine and the feminine within their own psyche, allowing each to emerge naturally as life calls for it. So when we talk about feminine energy in this video, we're not asking how to become more feminine at the expense of the masculine. We're asking, what does the feminine principle actually look like when it's healthy, integrated, and fully alive? And how do we develop a more conscious relationship with it within ourselves? That's what this video is really about. And that understanding naturally leads us to the framework we'll be using throughout this whole video. Because there are three distinct ways these energies can express, and learning to recognize which one you're in is what will help you live a happier and more fulfilling life. So first we have the healthy form, feminine energy that is strongly and fully expressed. It's integrated, it's alive, it moves through us without inner friction. Then we have the weakened form, traits of our psyche that are for some reason less developed, less acted upon. Parts of us that haven't yet found their full expression. And then perhaps most importantly, and certainly most painfully, we have the dysfunctional form, a more distorted or excessive way of expressing feminine energy, something that has tipped beyond its healthy range and started working against us. For me, the most important thing is to really understand what these two energies, masculine and feminine, look like in their healthy form. and what their distortions look like as well, because that's what lets us examine our own thoughts, emotions, and actions honestly using the archetypal guidance that Vedic astrology gives us. To understand feminine energy through astrology, we look primarily at two planets, the Moon and Venus, the two planets specifically described as female in the ancient Vedic texts. They represent two different but related dimensions of the feminine principle, and together they give a much more complete picture than either one alone. First and foremost, we will look at the Moon, the queen in the sky, the core feminine principle. I say that because the Moon only rules one sign, the female sign of Cancer, and as such, it is the most purely feminine planet, in symmetry with the other big light in our sky, the Sun, which rules only Leo and is the only purely masculine planet. The Sun represents the king archetype, while the Moon embodies the queen archetype. The Sun rules the day, our outer life, and the Moon rules the night, our inner world. Perfect symmetry. The Moon rules our conscious and subconscious mind, our imagination and memory. It is also the planet most deeply connected to the rhythm of our emotional life, to nourishment, and to having a sense of connection and belonging. Its core question is, what makes me feel safe and emotionally nourished? Venus is almost equally important for understanding feminine energy. And in fact, Venus is the more culturally familiar symbol of femininity. You've probably heard the expression, men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and that association isn't accidental. Venus rules Taurus and Libra, and Taurus, notably, is where the Moon finds both its mula trikona and its exaltation, which tells us something significant about the deep connection between these two planets. Venus is well known as the planet of relationships and romantic love, but also the planet of beauty, enjoyment, and sensuality. Venus is responsible for the pull towards what delights us, the appreciation of beauty, the capacity for pleasure and intimacy, the ability to relate, to compromise, to find a healthy give and take. It also governs what we find worth having and worth protecting. Venus rules our values in the most fundamental sense. Its question is, what do I love? What do I value? What do I enjoy? And what do I naturally attract? The Moon is the core feminine principle in astrology. And as we touched on, it's the most purely feminine planet, the only one whose mula trikona also falls in a female sign, Taurus. Interestingly, the other planet with the female mula trikona is Mercury, who in Vedic mythology is actually the son of the Moon. So whatever qualities we associate with the Moon, we can logically extend to the feminine polarity as a whole. If we begin by analyzing the most fundamental rhythm of life, during the day, which is made possible by the sun, we are immersed in the world of action, studying, working, striving, producing, and pursuing concrete goals. The night is presided over by the Moon, and it invites a different orientation. This is the time when we are typically devoted to more introverted activities and switch to a more feeling-centered state of mind. When it gets dark and the noise of the world dies down, we gradually allow ourselves to move into a more contemplative, vulnerable state. We process, we take stock, sit with our feelings, or pursue enjoyable activities in the company of others, and we seek rest and renewal, caring for our body and mind in preparation for the exertions the coming day will once again bring to us. While the day is devoted to linear thinking, the night brings about contemplation, a more holistic and rounded way to perceive reality. So the Moon speaks first and foremost to receptivity. This is the process of taking in a situation fully, feeling the reality of it rather than merely mentally analyzing it from a distance. It's the quality that allows for true emotional attunement, empathy, and intuitive insight. The Moon allows us to get on the same wavelength as something external to us so that we see the reflection of it within our very self and thus connect with it deeply. This way we can derive the kind of knowledge which would not be accessible to our linear analytical intelligence, allowing us to respond to life in the wisest possible way. This also allows us to internalize experiences and knowledge and to connect with others, to bond through this emotional imprint of events and thoughts into our psyche. The Moon rules the mind, our imagination and memories. It illuminates the dark sky at night, shedding light on that which is unseen, unconscious, and hidden. The Moon rules Cancer, the fourth sign, and number 4 sits at the bottom of the astral wheel, symbolizing the roots of our individuality, our deepest and most intimate parts. charts. The moon is also exalted in the earthy sign of Taurus, which is a very feminine and community-oriented sign. So the lunar archetype and thus the feminine polarity speaks to our early experiences, our ancestral patterns, our gut reactions, the way the body knows things before the mind has even caught up. And our mind has a core need above all others, to have a sense of home and safety, to feel connected to a stable emotional foundation, root system, to be physically and psychologically nourished. Both Cancer and Taurus have associations with sustenance, with home, and with family. Since the moon rules imagination and dream life, a strong moon in the chart gives us the power of imagination and inner vision, which in turn is connected to the ability to manifest our desires, but also our fears. There is an expression, things grow overnight, and it's not accidental. The moon rules the night, and it is at night, in rest, in receptivity, in the dream world, that things grow. The idea of manifestation is simply this: what our mind is consistently preoccupied with, what we genuinely envision and attune ourselves to, we begin to organically move toward. Cancer is particularly connected to motherhood, and so is the moon itself. Therefore, it's the feminine polarity that governs our ability to receive nurturing and nourishment from our environment, and then from a place of stability, fullness, and abundance, to share these with others as well, creating solid, emotionally fulfilling bonds in this process of mutual giving and receiving. It's important to know that the moon is subjective, which means that when there are afflictions to this part of our psyche, we are simply unable to perceive even the best offerings of physical and emotional comfort and richness as fulfilling. It's then a case of an inner sense of lack, which is something to be healed by going within rather than trying to change our external conditions. In other words, when there are afflictions to the feminine energy in a person, they struggle to feel safe, comfortable, loved, relaxed, and satiated. Emotional groundedness here is not about being calm or happy all of the time, but about having an inner foundation that can truly register and retain nourishing experiences, so they become part of our baseline rather than something we're always chasing externally. Taurus is a feminine earthy sign, one might say the most central of the 12 signs. Taurus rules the face and the throat, where most of our sensory organs are located. The moon being exalted in the sign of sustenance, material provision, and enjoyment of the senses tells us that the feminine polarity is about being open to receive fully from the enjoyment and variety of the world, to a degree that is healthy and satiating. This reminds me of a quote from Oscar Wilde: "I adore simple pleasures. They are the last refuge of the complex." And indeed, what is more complex on this earth than the human mind and psyche? Astrology shows us that while satiating our physical senses is not by itself enough to achieve the ultimate emotional fulfillment and psychological health, it certainly is a vital foundation for it. This is why so many addictions come down to an attempt to escape mental anguish and achieve a sense of fulfillment and connection through our physical senses, and why specific tastes, meals, smells, and sounds can instantly transport us to a familiar emotional state. The Brihad Parashara Hora Shastra, one of the most respected sources of knowledge on Vedic astrology, describes the moon like this: "Abounding in Vata and Kapha and filled with knowing is the moon of round body, auspiciously eyed, of sweet speech, fluctuating and lovesick." It's common for Vedic wisdom to be conveyed in such compact and highly symbolic formats, so we need to analyze this short description word for word. The Vata-Kapha component refers to two of the three Ayurvedic constitutions. Kapha is about stillness, nurturing, and receptivity. Vata is about movement and change. Together, they speak to the moon's connection to nourishment and growth, to receptivity, but also to instability, responsiveness, and movement. A healthy lunar feminine energy doesn't demand that life be fixed and predictable in order to feel safe. Instead, it trusts its own capacity to move with the tides of circumstance and to find equilibrium within change. The filled with knowing part is a nod to the all-encompassing wisdom of the female polarity. This tells us that the intelligence of the feminine is more instinctive rather than logical, but has a direct connection to source. The moon's wisdom is relational, embodied, and intuitive. It senses what is happening beneath the surface of things. This is the intelligence of the body, of the gut, the insight you receive as a result of paying long and loving attention to how things actually feel and what they actually need. A gut feeling is a spark of insight obtained by subconscious pattern recognition, and that is one of the most powerful ways to arrive at knowledge. Jupiter, the guru planet associated with wisdom and higher insight, is exalted in Cancer, which is the moon-ruled sign after all. Mars, the planet of engineering and logic, instead is debilitated in Cancer. Mars is about linear thinking. A plus B equals C. There is tremendous value in logical thinking, but wisdom goes even beyond that, recognizing that life is more complex than a mere mathematical equation. The more deeply we allow ourselves to feel and to imagine, the more the moon can offer us this kind of non-linear yet remarkably accurate guidance. Then we come to the round body component of the description. The more straightforward interpretation here is that, of course, the feminine figure is characterized by more rounded shapes, whereas the masculine form is more squarish. But beyond that, the round or circular form is associated with fullness, with completeness, with the cycle. The moon cycles, it waxes and wanes, and the circle is the shape that contains the entire movement. So round is pointing at something about the cyclical, rhythmic, encompassing quality of feminine energy. The round form also speaks to receptivity and nourishment. The moon seeks to be filled, to receive, to hold. Think of a vessel, a cup, a womb. And finally, rounded shapes are more natural and harmonious in and of themselves. There aren't really perfectly straight lines in nature. So the feminine polarity is about harmonizing with the natural flow of life. People with a strong, healthy moon often feel easy to be around in just this way. They carry a softness, a wholeness that quietly invites others into a more natural, relaxed state. Have you noticed how people who are fully at peace with themselves also make it very easy to feel calm and accepted in their presence? Auspiciously eyed reminds us that the moon seeks both to receive and to provide acceptance, comforting to self and others. It is gentle in its gaze. It looks at the world and at the people in it with a certain fundamental goodwill. There is something profoundly empathetic and endearing in people who have a prominent moon somehow in their charts. That same quality, being auspiciously eyed, means the moon is always looking for win-wins in life, a way that everyone can benefit somehow. When we say that the day is auspicious, we mean that we can expect good fortune on that day, a good outcome. This goes a long way in explaining why folks with strong masculine energy are typically attracted to win-lose games, competitions, and dynamics, whereas people with more integrated feminine energy prefer more wholesome and collaborative endeavors, where there aren't really any losers in the true sense, but rather everyone benefits somehow from the interaction. Of sweet speech is pretty self-explanatory. The moon's default MO is to treat others kindly and gently, but also to be treated with tenderness and sweetness itself. There is grace and diplomacy here. Sweet speech is the quality of communication that comes from a place of genuine feeling and care. A naturally nourishing way with words that is the product of genuine attunement to the people we're speaking with. This is the person who somehow says the right thing at the right moment, because they made it a point to listen attentively to understand what the other person really needs to hear. This is in contrast with Sun, where the speech is rather direct, and with Mars, where it's about bluntness and getting to the point as efficiently as possible. The Moon instead is about warm, compassionate, charming communication that requires emotional intelligence. The Moon, interestingly, is also the planet most associated with popularity. And if you think about what popularity really is at its core, it's exactly this. People feel seen, felt, and understood in your presence. That's the moon working at its best. Fluctuating, or fickle in some texts, is a nod to a very fundamental quality associated with the moon, that is adaptability and responsiveness. The moon moves and changes. It wanes and grows, ebbs and flows. It rules the ocean's tides, and our own bodies mirror these patterns. In women, the hormonal cycle literally follows the lunar rhythm. The moon is the fastest moving planet in the sky, completing its cycle in about 28 days. So the fickle quality is really pointing at its extraordinary responsiveness to what is happening around it, and it grants us the ability to adapt in order to survive and thrive within constantly evolving circumstances. So a healthy feminine energy is by definition fickle, in the most beautiful sense of that word. It perceives what is in the environment and adapts to it. It changes course when changes what the moment requires. The ability to change our minds, to be responsive rather than rigid rigidly locked in, is one of the great superpowers of the feminine. And finally, we come to the lovesick component in the quote. The feminine part of our psyche is like the negative pole of the magnet. It seeks union and connection with something outside of itself. In mundane astrology, the moon always represents us, the people. The moon is lovesick because it represents our conscious awareness of being a separate individual. And that separateness, however necessary, is at its root a kind of existential ache for us. We know somewhere very deep within us that we were not always separate, and we long to merge again with another person, with a community, with something greater than ourselves. That longing is what drives so much of human experience. It's why relationships are so central to life. It's why so much of art across every civilization and every era so far has been about love, belonging, and union. The moon is the part of us that feels that ache most acutely. And that craving is not a weakness, it is the very thing that opens us up to connection. We briefly touched on Taurus in the moon section because Taurus is the sign of the moon's mula trikona and exaltation. But we also need to look at Taurus again in more depth while discussing Venus, because Venus rules Taurus and Taurus is the second sign in the zodiac. First, there is a strong symbolism here with the number 2. Aries is the first sign. It asks, who am I? What are my thoughts and ideas? Let me put them into action. Aries is the conquering mentality of breaking out into the world and claiming some territory for yourself, metaphorically speaking. That first bold step forward. Taurus is the second sign, the second step. And what do we do with that second foot when we're walking? We stabilize ourselves. We bring ourselves back into balance. Once we stand on 2 feet, we're more stable, more secure, more safe in the world. The same logic applies to Taurus as the second sign. So the first sign is entrepreneurial and opportunistic. It risks, it pioneers, it does something brand new with life. At the second step, we want to ensure that whatever has been conquered so far is safe and secure for us, that it supports our stability. In Taurus, the conqueror, the soldier, the general who just claimed new territory now asks, is there food here to eat? What do I sustain myself with? What resources do I have to survive and thrive in this new place? Taurus is where we lay down our roots and make use of what is in our environment for our enjoyment, comfort, safety, and survival. Taurus is fixed earth, patient, persistent, deeply rooted. It doesn't rush, it doesn't need to. Taurus understands that real things take time to grow and is willing to be that patient. This is the feminine principle as endurance and steadiness, the kind of loyalty and devotion that doesn't waver just because things get difficult sometimes. Taurus has a very specific relationship with the body and with physical reality. It is the most tactile, sensory, and earthy of all the signs. For Taurus, reality is what can be felt, tasted, touched, and inhabited. This is not materialism in a shallow sense. It is a deep honoring of the physical world as sacred. The body is not a burden to be managed. It is a vehicle of all actual experience. The physical senses are not necessarily distractions from the spiritual. They can also be a direct path into it. Taurus is very much about material survival, material enjoyment, security, and long-term stability. It is about resourcefulness, providing the resources for our existence here on Earth. Nothing else in our life really matters unless we make sure that we survive to see another day, right? This is why the moon has its mula trikona and exaltation here. The moon represents our separate existence and our individual awareness, distinct from the universe and divine consciousness. Once we're separate, we must survive as a separate organism. At the very base level, that is Taurus, and it is ruled by Venus. Venus is fundamentally about ensuring our material survival and the felt experience of being safe, nourished, and supported. The moon's exaltation in Taurus tells us that the emotional body is at its most stable and nourished when it is physically grounded, when there is beauty, sensory richness, and the felt experience of having enough in life. The moon in Taurus is the moon at peace. That is a teaching in and of itself. Now, one thing we need to clarify is that Venus is a guru planet. Guru planets are Brahmin planets. They are about wisdom and higher knowledge, and they give us advice and guidance on how to live a better life. life, how to be good people, how to have a fulfilling, free, and moral life. The two guru planets are Jupiter and Venus. So Venus is not just about enjoyment, it is about wisdom, and specifically wisdom applied to a very pragmatic and practical existence here on Earth. You can think of Venus as an earthy advisor. In modern terms, Venus acts like a life and financial advisor, a life coach, but more broadly, it is the planet of making smart choices in life that ensure we're thriving, comfortable, safe, and surviving. It is very important to remember that Venus is a guru planet, which brings us back to the wisdom of feminine energy. The wisdom of feminine energy is very much about ensuring our own survival in this world and the survival of those within our responsibility. Most immediately children, but really anyone within our scope of love, compassion, family, and companionship. Venus teaches us to make wise, practical choices as we move through life, to choose what is worthwhile, what supports comfort, security, stability, survival, and meaningful enjoyment. That is Venus as guru. Taurus also rules many of our sensory organs. In the body, Taurus rules the face and the throat, and on the face we have the eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. So aside from the skin, most sensory organs belong here. Taurus shows us Venus's dimension of interacting with the world in very tangible, earthy ways. We can smell things, we can hear how things sound, we can see what is available around us. In a basic survival hunter-gatherer sense, we can gather fruits because their colors pop out and we can see them with our eyes. Our nose can detect which food is rotting and which is fresh, aromatic, and safe to eat. This is what Venus is about, sorting through life between what is good for us and what is not good for us. The sensory organs ensure that we interact practically with the world around us in order to weigh our options. Taurus also rules the mouth and throat, and that brings two very important things. First, speech. Speech and communication are absolutely vital for human survival and collaboration with others. This naturally connects to Libra, which we will talk about in more detail later, but even here we can see that feminine energy is about communication, interacting with the world, articulating our needs. We speak about who we are, what we like, what we don't like, what we need and what we don't need, and with our ears we receive information about the needs of other people as well. Taurus is the level at which we begin this interaction with our community to ensure our survival, our happiness, and our fulfillment. Second, the mouth and throat are about food and consumption, of course. This is again why Taurus exalts the moon. The moon is about having our basic needs met and ensuring survival. Through Taurus, we're able to taste and consume, to let things nourish us. Venus, and consequently feminine energy, is about consumption in the deeper sense, allowing the right things to enter our system. It is no accident that feminine energy is associated with browsing, shopping, acquiring beautiful, suitable, practical, helpful objects and material things and services for ourselves and for the people that we love. Venus observes what is out there, evaluates it, and then connects with it through our senses and body to ensure our needs are met and to allow for enjoyment. The senses provide both survival information and sensory enjoyment as well. Mars rules hunger because it is fiery, striving, burning through things, wanting more. Venus is about consuming and satiation. Through Venus, through feminine energy, we do not just distinguish good quality from bad quality, nutritious from poisonous, beautiful from ugly, and high quality from low quality. We also learn when to stop. Venus indicates our feeling of enough. This is why being able to say no is so important. Venus and Saturn are mutual friends because Saturn is about saying no and Venus is about knowing when to say no. Healthy feminine energy is deeply about this type of discernment in life. Feminine energy is about making wise, practical, pragmatic choices. What do I want? What do I need? What do I say yes to? And what do I say no to? This connects directly with Libra. Libra is the seventh sign, opposite the first sign, which is the self. Libra is about interacting with our environment, especially with other people, because it is an air sign, a social sign. Through Venus, through our feminine energy, we see this connection to communicating with others, collaborating, stating our needs, hearing theirs, and coming into compromise, diplomacy, and negotiation with others. Libra seeks terms that are agreeable for both parties, win-win situations, deals that suit both sides long-term. Libra rules marketplaces and bazaars, the archetypal shopping center. And what is the shopping center? It is the place where you see your options, where you choose what you can purchase to make your life better. Venus, and consequently feminine energy, is really about being highly aware of options and being adaptable enough, with the help of the moon, to change your mind as new information arrives. You may be determined to furnish your house in a certain way, but once you explore more choices, you realize you can decorate your flat more functionally, more practically, more comfortably, and for less money. And this is Libra, evaluating all possible choices, being aware of your options, being wise enough, Venus as guru, to evaluate and then choosing the best thing for yourself. Feminine energy is very much about being able to pick wisely, seeing all of your options, selecting what is best for you long term through wisdom, practicality, earthy knowledge, and through communication and collaboration with others. Some of the most helpful networks of information and exchange are women sharing knowledge and experiences with one another. Female friendship is a beautiful and deeply useful thing. Through female friendships, people share stories, insights, and practical guidance. Feminine energy excels at this kind of information exchange. There are countless jokes about men spending hours together, and then when asked, "What does your friend do? How is his marriage? How is his health?" replying, "I have no idea." They spend the whole day together, yet know almost nothing about each other's actual lives, especially private lives. This running joke points to a real difference between masculine and feminine energy. Feminine energy, through sensory input and communication, really understands options and realities. In our vast modern world full of variety, we simply cannot do everything on our own. We must interact, collaborate, and exchange information in order to survive and thrive. Venus and Libra represent that social, informational, relational intelligence. Both Taurus and Libra have strong connotations with communication with our contacts, comrades, friends, and relatives, and with ensuring that our communication is tactful, diplomatic, smart, gentle, and empathetic. Venus wants people to enjoy interacting with us so that friendships and partnerships can be formed and sustained long term. Libra, as an air sign ruled by Venus, is deeply about beauty and communication, beauty and collaboration. It ensures our interaction with the world is harmonious. So feminine energy is highly collaborative. It is about understanding our needs and keeping them in mind, but also about real empathy for the needs of others and bringing situations into win-win balance where everyone benefits somehow. Through empathy and engagement with others, we also ensure that we can provide value. Taurus is very much about value and worth. Venus and feminine energy help us feel valuable and worthy within ourselves. We come to understand what we can offer to the world and consequently receive something in return for our skills, our value, and even for our presence. The value we bring just by being there, by communicating, by sensing, by having taste, by offering wisdom, advice, and guidance to others. All of these Venusian functions teach us about our worth as human beings and our resourcefulness. From there, we can enter healthy, fruitful, and beneficial exchanges with others. This is very much what feminine energy is about. Venus is exalted in Pisces, and here we see the most transcendent and unbounded expression of feminine energy. Pisces is mutable water, adaptive, flowing, permeable, the space where boundaries soften and things merge. Venus in Pisces loves without condition, not in a self-erasing, codependent way, but as a love that is not primarily transactional or limited only to those who have earned it. This is the compassionate, universal side of the feminine, being genuinely moved by others' reality, feeling the world's beauty and pain, and allowing a real response from the heart. Pisces also shows how feminine energy connects to spiritual practice. When the ego boundary dissolves in meditation, prayer, genuine devotion, or moments of being fully present, we briefly step out of the separate self and into something larger. That softening into unity through love, beauty, compassion, or art is very Piscean Venusian. So Pisces adds a specific quality to feminine energy: capacity for unconditional, non-transactional warmth, deep empathy and emotional openness to the wider human experience, a mystical devotional streak, the ability to experience connection with something greater than oneself. The shadow of Pisces is, of course, losing discernment, becoming so permeable that we absorb others' pain as our own or drift away from our own reality. The task here is to keep Venus and Pisces open-hearted without becoming boundaryless, to feel deeply but still still choose wisely. In the larger picture, Taurus grounds this compassion in the body and material reality, Libra brings it into balanced relationship with others, and Pisces lifts it into a more universal spiritual form of feminine love. Just as we analyze the moon through a quote from the Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, we can understand another facet of feminine polarity by looking at how the same text describes Venus. The moon showed us the inner emotional receptive layer of the feminine psyche. Venus now shows us the relational, aesthetic, and value-oriented dimension of that same feminine principle. The text says, "Pleasing, lovely formed, the most splendid and beautifully eyed is Venus, who is poetical, abounding in kapha, vata nature, and curly-haired." Every word here is deliberate. Let's unpack what it tells us about Venus and healthy feminine energy. First, Venus is pleasing. This isn't just about looks necessarily, it's about the overall quality of someone's presence. Venusian energy is charming, kind, gentle, diplomatic. It has a way of interacting that naturally softens tension and makes other people feel comfortable. Spoken or unspoken, the message is, you can relax here. Feminine energy expressed through Venus is the social lubricant of life. It smooths over rough edges, finds polite and graceful ways to say things, and instinctively knows how to make interactions more enjoyable for everyone involved. It doesn't only seek harmony for itself, it beautifies and harmonizes the field around it. Lovely formed points to harmony and proportion. This is not a rigid beauty standard. It is about being close to nature, shaped in ways that feel balanced and coherent. On the physical level, it suggests a form that is in proportion, rounded rather than jagged, organic rather than forced. On the symbolic level, it becomes a metaphor for everything in life. Feminine energy is constantly seeking this kind of harmony in the body, in the environment, in relationships, in decisions. It asks, is this in balance? Is there a sense of right measure here, or is something a little bit off? Feminine energy here is harmony seeking by nature. It is tuned to imbalance and wants to bring things back into an arrangement where parts fit together beautifully, where there is proportion instead of distortion. Next, we have beautifully eyed. Eyes are not only physical features, they're conduits of perception and connection. They're drawn to what is beautiful, to what moves them, and they notice the subtle emotional reality of people and situations. These beautiful eyes are relational intelligence in action, seeing the humanity and value in others, reading emotional cues, and responding with genuine compassion. Feminine energy here is deeply connective. It doesn't just look at people, it sees them, it perceives vulnerability, effort, and emotion, and naturally wants to relate. This is part of why Venus is the planet of attraction and relationships. It rules how we see one another and how we let ourselves be seen. The text calls Venus poetical. This is a crucial piece. The Venusian mode of expression is not the straight logical line of the sun or the rapid analytical processing of Mercury. It is relational, aesthetic, and resonant. Poetic intelligence means finding the image that captures the feeling, the metaphor that communicates what plain description can't describe. It is the intelligence of the artist, the lover, the person who responds to life with depth and sensibility rather than pure rationality. Poetic Venus sees symbolism everywhere. It is the part of us that senses deeper meaning beneath the surface of events and words, and understands that life often speaks through patterns, images, and echoes. Feminine energy in this mode reads between the lines. It notices recurring dynamics, themes in relationships, signs that the situation is part of a larger story. This is how it understands the patterns of the universe intuitively, through resonance rather than through straightforward logic. The text says Venus is abounding in kapha of vata nature. Kapha is earth and water, stable, slow-moving, devoted, deeply loyal, built for endurance. It is the constitution that loves deeply and holds on. This is the Venus side of feminine energy that is steady, comforting, and dependable. When something or someone is genuinely worth it, Venusian Kapha energy can be deeply and steadily devoted. Its shadow, when distorted, is possessiveness or difficulty letting go, trying to hold on even when a cycle has clearly completed. Vata is air and movement, change, openness, flexibility, responsiveness. This is the part of Venus that reviews options, adapts, and responds to shifting circumstances. It is what allows feminine energy to be accommodating, to change its mind when new information appears, and to adjust course when life calls for it. Healthy feminine energy carries both. It is steady and comforting, yet flexible and open to change. It can root deeply where there is true value, offer genuine comfort and loyalty, and at the same time stay adaptable, willing to refine choices and approaches as situations evolve. Likes comfort and peace, but is also curious and open for new experiences. And finally, Venus is described as curly-haired. On the surface, this sounds merely aesthetic, but symbolically it's very rich. Curls point to the spiral. The spiral is one of the most profound esoteric symbols we have. It appears in galaxies, shells, hurricanes, and even in our very DNA. It is the shape of the cycle of life and death, not a straight line from beginning to end, but a continuous movement that revisits, deepens, and evolves. In mythology, Venus as Shukra is the guru of the Asuras and is associated with the power to resurrect, to bring life back after death. That is spiral symbolism in action. Endings leading into new beginnings, loss folding back into renewal, decay becoming the soil for new growth. Feminine energy in this Venusian sense understands that life moves in cycles, not in clean, one-directional lines. On a more concrete level, DNA itself has a spiral structure and is passed down through procreation. Venus rules relationships, union, and co-creating with others, including sexual union and the creation of new life. The spiral belongs to Venus because it is the pattern of connection and continuity. We join with others, we create, we pass something forward, and that pattern repeats across generations. So curly hair tells us that Venusian feminine energy is not linear. It evolves through cycles, recurring themes, death and rebirth processes, and ever deepening connections. It doesn't simply move from point A to point B and leave the past behind. It returns, integrates, and weaves experience into a richer tapestry of meaning. So now that we've completed the in-depth astrological analysis of Moon and Venus, the two female planets in astrology, I wanted us to create a list of core feminine traits. And for each of these traits, I will offer you my idea of what it looks like in its healthy form, what it looks like when it's weakened, and then what it looks like when it's dysfunctional. So here we go. Receptivity is one of the core traits we associate with the feminine polarity. When feminine energy is healthily integrated in the psyche, a person is open and perceptive, able to receive what is nourishing from life, from others, and from their own inner world. When feminine energy is weak here, they become closed off and defended, disconnected from their needs and from what could actually support them. When it is excessive, receptivity loses discernment. The person becomes overly porous, absorbing every influence, emotion, and demand without any filter. Adaptability is another expression of feminine energy. It is the ability to move with life rather than fighting it. When feminine energy is healthy, a person is flexible, responsive, and able to change course as circumstances evolve without losing themselves. When this energy is underexpressed, they become rigid and fearful of change, clinging to old patterns even when those patterns no longer serve them. And when it is overexpressed, adaptability tips into chaos. The person is constantly shifting, changing plans, and reinventing themselves without any grounding or continuity. Emotional security belongs deeply to the feminine principle, especially through the moon. When feminine energy is integrated, there is a sense of inner safety. The person can soothe themselves, feel held within, and remain steady even when life is challenging. When this feminine aspect is weak, they feel chronically unsafe inside, anxious, needy, always looking outward for reassurance that never quite lands. When it is excessive, emotional security turns into emotional self-enclosure, walls so thick that the person becomes overprotective and avoids any experience that might stretch or grow them. Another trait we associate with the feminine polarity is intuition, of course. When feminine energy is healthy in someone's psyche, they have a clear inward knowing that helps them arrive at truth without needing endless linear logic and analysis. They can feel when something is right or wrong on a deeper level. When the feminine energy here is less integrated, they're cut off from the signals of their own mind and body, mistrust their inner voice, and override it with external noise, like overthinking and anxiety. anxiety. When it is excessive, intuition becomes distorted. The person may slip into irrationality, superstition, or acting on impressions that are more projection than genuine insight. Nurturance is a very obvious expression of feminine energy. When this energy is healthy, a person is nourishing, supportive, and emotionally generous. They give care in ways that truly strengthen others. When feminine nurturance is underexpressed, they become cold or unavailable, withholding warmth and support even when it is needed. And when it is overexpressed, nurturance turns into smothering, overmothering, rescuing, or helping in controlling ways that keep others small or dependent. Sensuality, the ease of being in the body and with the senses, is a Venusian feminine trait. When feminine energy is healthy, a person is embodied and present, able to enjoy taste, touch, beauty, and physical comfort without either shame or compulsion. When it is weak, they feel numb and disconnected from pleasure, almost cut off from their own body and its signals. When it is excessive, sensuality can become indulgence, being led by pleasure, over-attached to comfort and stimulation, and neglecting deeper values. The drive toward harmony and balance is a hallmark of feminine energy, especially through Libra. When this energy is healthy, a person becomes peacemaking, fair, diplomatic, able to restore balance and create win-win situations. When it is underexpressed, they're abrasive or socially clumsy, generating unnecessary friction where cooperation would be possible. And when it is overexpressed, harmony seeking turns into conflict avoidance. They appease, they stay silent, or sacrifice truth and boundaries just to keep the peace. Relational intelligence, understanding people, timing, tone, and reciprocity, is a refined expression of feminine energy. In its healthy form, it allows a person to sense what a moment or relationship needs and to respond with tact and emotional intelligence. When feminine energy is weak here, they become tone deaf in relationships, misreading situations and making poor social judgments. When it is excessive, the same skill can slide into manipulation. Interactions become overly strategic, image managed, and more about control than genuine connection. Self-worth is a Taurus-Venus theme and a fundamental part of feminine energy. When this aspect is healthy, a person knows their value and naturally chooses relationships, work, and environments that reflect it. They don't settle beneath their dignity. When feminine self-worth is underexpressed, they are insecure, self-abandoning, and ready to accept far less than they truly deserve. When it is excessive, self-worth inflates into entitlement and vanity, an exaggerated sense of specialness that resists accountability and reciprocity. Discernment, choosing what is truly worthwhile and life-giving, is another Venusian facet of feminine energy. When it is healthy, a person can tell the difference between what nourishes them and what merely tempts or distracts, and acts accordingly. When this feminine quality is weak, judgment is poor. They are easily lured by what is harmful, low quality, or misaligned with their values. When it is excessive, discernment hardens into perfectionism. Nothing is ever good enough, and the person becomes impossible to satisfy. The capacity for rest, comfort, and rejuvenation is very much a feminine Moon-Venus quality. When feminine energy is healthy, a person allows themselves to stop, restore, and be cared for so that their system can genuinely recover. When it is underexpressed, they overwork, neglect their needs, and cannot switch off from thought and action. They feel guilty for resting. When it is excessive, rest turns into lethargy and passivity, an over-attachment to comfort that resists effort and responsibility. Imagination is the inner creative power of the feminine, the ability to dream and envision before anything exists in the outer world. When this energy is healthy, a person can picture better realities, generate inspiration, and quietly move toward what they inwardly see. When it is underexpressed, life feels spiritually dry. They cannot imagine anything different, and so they remain stuck. When it is excessive, imagination drifts into fantasy and fear. They get lost in projections, worries, or daydreams and stop engaging with reality. The experience of fulfillment and satiation is a key feminine theme. When feminine energy is healthy, a person can feel enough. grateful, satisfied, and able to actually enjoy what is good in their life. When it is weak, they remain perpetually empty and restless, unable to receive or internalize good experiences no matter how much they have. When it is excessive, fulfillment becomes complacency, a reluctance to stretch, grow, or leave the comfort zone because things feel good enough on the surface. Connection, bonding, belonging, mutual support is central to feminine energy. In its healthy form, it allows a person to love well, form deep bonds, and participate in relationships where support flows both ways. When this feminine trait is underexpressed, they become isolated, emotionally detached, or unavailable, even when they crave closeness. When it is overexpressed, connection turns into enmeshment, clinginess, overdependence, and an inability to tolerate separateness or space. Softness is the gentle, soothing surface of feminine energy. When it is healthy, softness makes a person approachable and calming. Others feel safe and relaxed in their presence, while their inner strength remains intact. When it is weak, they present as harsh, defended, brittle, or emotionally inaccessible. When it is excessive, softness lacks structure. Boundaries collapse, they over-accommodate for others, and they tend to fold under pressure instead of standing firm when needed. The love of beauty and the ability to create a pleasing atmosphere are distinctly Venusian expressions of feminine energy. When healthy, a person uses beauty to nourish, arranging spaces, clothing, food, and experiences in ways that bring harmony and calm to themselves and others. When this is underexpressed, they neglect their environment and see little beauty in life, which subtly dulls their spirit over time. When it is excessive, aesthetic sense turns into superficiality. Image and appearance become more important than substance. Finally, value-aligned choice is a mature form of feminine energy, acting in ways that are consistent with one's true values and long-term well-being. When this quality is healthy, a person's decisions reflect what they genuinely care about and they feel congruent inside. When it is weak, they drift, decide from confusion or lack, and end up in situations that don't really match who they are. When it is excessive, the same sensitivity becomes overthinking. They overweigh every option, calculate endlessly, and can become passive or paralyzed instead of actually choosing and acting. I hope this video gave you a more grounded and nuanced understanding of feminine energy beyond the trends and buzzwords. If it did, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.